Good evening, wow. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone tonight? Thank you so much for joining us here for an evening with Stuart Woods. My name is Anthony Rodriguez. I'm the producing artistic director here at the Aurora Theatre, and it is my pleasure.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm not much of a public speaker. I'm just going to ramble on for a few minutes about the work I'm doing, and then I'll take questions. And please remember, if you don't have any questions, the program is going to be a lot shorter than planned. So try and think of some. One thing that's happened since I last saw any of you is I got married 3 months ago. Jean-Marie, where are you? There she is. Stand up. This is her first book tour as a wife. And she's holding up very well, I have to say. Let's see, this is my 52nd novel, I think. The 50th was a couple of years ago. I've completed 2 more, which are scheduled to be published now, so I've now written 54. It took me 8 years to write my first novel. This was Chiefs, and I attribute that to a disease that first novelists have. It's a special kind of writer's block. It's the fear that the book is not going to be as good as you've been telling your friends it's going to be. And if you don't finish it, nobody ever finds you out. So I struggled with that, and I finally got it done, and then I began to write a book every other year, which was what the few writers I knew seemed to do. And when I was working on Chiefs, I worked 4 hours a day because that was as long as I could write without becoming tired and start to make grammatical and spelling mistakes. So I would work 2 hours in the morning, have some lunch, and then work 2 hours in the afternoon. And as time went by, I began to gain some confidence, I guess, and I had a revelation that instead of writing a book every other year, I wrote a book every year, I would be paid twice as much, or at least twice as often, which is almost as good because writers always have cash flow problems. So I started to write a book a year. And then I went to my publisher, who at that time was HarperCollins, and said, I'm a little underworked here. You know, by this time I had my day work down to 2 or 3 hours a day, and I wasn't even working every day. And I said, I want to write 2 books a year. And he said, well, everybody in publishing knows you can't do that. Because if you write more than 1 book a year, your readers get tired of you and stop reading your books. And I said, oh, is that what happened to Stephen King and Joyce Carol Oates and all those other people? And he said, well, those are all exceptions. So I had to leave the publisher in order to find a publisher who would guarantee to publish 2 books a year. So I went to Putnam, and they agreed to publish, and in the spring and autumn, because those are the good flying months, and I fly myself on book tours. No snow and ice in the spring and autumn, not as many thunderstorms then as well. So we rocked along like this for, I guess, a year or 2, and my publisher took me to lunch one day, and he said, would you consider writing 3 books a year? And I said, yes, immediately. And I think he was a little taken aback by that, but what he didn't know was that by this time I had my workday down to 1 hour a day, and I was only working about 3 days a week. So I agreed to do that, and he was nervous about it until I finished the manuscript of the first one early, and he liked it. And after that, he's been just fine with doing 3 a year. I take great pleasure in sending my writer friends copies of my books because they sometimes write a book every 3 or 4 years. Not many of them even write a book a year, and it drives them nuts. Then I'm able to turn them out at a greater rate. So that's how I've compiled the kind of backlist that I now have with more than 50 books there. And if I can keep thinking and moving my fingers at the same time, I may be able to write another 50, who knows, over time. But I don't see any problem with continuing to write 3 a year for the time being, because it pleases me to work every day, or almost every day. And in fact, I often work 7 days a week when I'm in Key West and and Maine, not so much in New York. I guess there are too many distractions there. Now, that brings you up to date. There are 2 more books already finished, and those will be out. I'm now publishing in January, April, and September, or they may be October this year. So you can look for those books to come along at that point, and if you watch the website, then you'll know what's going to happen and what the tour schedule is going to be. Now, who has a question? Yes?
You know, you mentioned your fingers. Do you do the speaking?
Everybody all right? Oh, no, I've never tried that.
Heard of it? You stick it in your...
Yes, I've watched my doctor do it, and he makes it look very easy, but I don't have any experience with dictating. The best course I took in high school was I spent a whole year on a typing course, and I learned to type reasonably well, and I learned better to think on the typewriter, and which is how I think. So I don't think in terms of speaking, although I've known some authors who did that. I can type about as fast as I can think, maybe a little faster, and so I'll just keep doing it that way on the computer, I think. Yes?
Why did you kill Elaine?
A lot of people will be surprised to learn that Elaine Kaufman was not a character, but a real person. And her restaurant was a real restaurant. I get a lot of email about this, and when I get it, I just say, Google Elaine. And that explains that she died 3 years ago, I guess, and of lung disease. And the restaurant lasted about 6 months after that and closed. So now there are a lot of writers wandering up and down 2nd Avenue wondering where to have dinner. And no other restaurant has replaced Elaine's in our affection as a group. You know, we go here and there, but there was only one Elaine, and there was only one Elaine's. I'll tell you a couple of stories about her. You have to be Jewish to understand one of them, so maybe you were sitting next to somebody who will explain it to you. Some years ago, Elaine was open 364 days a year. She closed on Christmas night, but only because nobody would come if she opened. And she was open on Passover one year, and she was Jewish. And a man came into the restaurant and began to remonstrate with her about being open on the holiday. And her response was, "Why is this night different from all other nights?" So I hear a few Jews who understand that. That is the first line of the Seder, the Passover ceremony. So she was very quick. The other one was told by Bill Bratton, who was the police commissioner in New York under Rudolph Giuliani. And he was so successful at reducing crime in New York that it became the safest big city in the world. And it drove Rudolph Giuliani crazy because he wasn't getting the credit for it. Bill Bratton was. So finally, he forced Bill out, and Bill said that on his last day in the office, Giuliani came in and gave him the key to the city. And he was meeting his wife, Ricky, at Elaine's for dinner, and he took it, and Elaine came over and sat down, and the box was on the table, and she said, "What's in the box?" And he said, "It's the key to the city," and he opened it and showed it to her. She said, "Giuliani gave you this?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "I'll bet the son of a bitch has already changed the locks." That was Elaine. Yeah. Yes.
If you were not a writer, what would you be doing?
I think I'd probably be working down at the car wash. I have a very narrow skill set, and if I couldn't write for a living, I wouldn't be making a living, or not much of one anyway. Yes.
Now that Will Wade is not president anymore,
Well, he's still president for a short time longer.
are you going to continue to write about him?
Well, I don't want to answer that too fully because I'm working on a book right now which, let's say, may extend the Lee presence in the White House. But I don't want to go into it any more deeply than that. Yes?
Tell us a little bit about Stone's airplane.
Well, oddly enough, he has the same airplane I do. And has consistently, but he flies a Cessna Citation Mustang, which is the smallest jet in the Cessna stable, and that's what I fly too. And it's a nice little airplane that holds 6 people. It goes 340 knots, goes up to 41,000 feet. And with a tailwind, it can cover, even with no wind, it can cover about 1,100 miles without refueling. And in September, I'm moving up to a new Cessna airplane called the M2, which is designed to be a move-up airplane for Mustang pilots. And that goes a little faster and a little farther and is a little bigger inside. And my wife is about to take her private check ride, and we're going to see if we can get her trained to be co-pilot in that. And
same abbreviated air training Stone Gun?
no, unfortunately, we have to go to Wichita for 2 weeks, and second prize is 3 weeks in Wichita, and so it's a grim experience. At the time I had to go the last time, 4 years ago, my girlfriend at the time was an airline pilot, and she said it was the worst training experience she'd ever had, that hers was so much easier. She was flying the big French jets. So I'm not looking forward to the training experience, but I'm looking forward to flying the airplane once we get out. Yes, in the back there.
Go into a little bit of the detailed relationship between Stone and Dino.
Details, when they were both cops, they were partners. They formed an ironclad friendship, which continues to this day. After Stone was invited to leave the police force, Dino stayed on, and he, in the last book or two, has been promoted to chief of detectives, and so he's doing very well, and their relationship remains the same. Yes.
Is Herbie Fisher going to replace Stone as the main character of your book?
No, although Herbie has done a lot of growing up the last couple of years.
He's getting awful
And
smart.
Stone has always been his role model, and he's become a bit more like Stone, and he turns up every now and then when Stone finds some legal work that he doesn't want to do himself, and he calls Herbie. It used to be that Stone's job at Woodman and Well was to handle the cases that the Woodman and Well didn't want to be seen to be handling, and Herbie's doing that kind of now, I guess.
Last spring, I had the opportunity to go to Elaine's, and I asked for Stone's table. They put me there, and I said, give me what Stone drinks, and they gave me a double shot of Knob Creek.
Last spring? I think your timeline's a little messed up there. She's been dead for 3 years. But
I know it, Elaine wasn't there.
oh, well, the restaurant died 6 months after she did, so it must have been a little further back. How many of those Knob Creeks did you have that night? Yes. Who else? Yes.
Who are some of your favorite authors?
My favorite author of all time is Mark Twain. I think he's our best American writer and the funniest of all. But I don't read much fiction. I read mostly nonfiction. I read history and biography. And very occasionally, I've just read 2 historical novels that were written by an English woman. And one is called Wolf Hall, and the other is called Bring Up the Bodies. And that's some of the best fiction I've ever read. She's a wonderful writer, and it's about Henry VIII and his efforts to get rid of his first wife and acquire the second one, then to get rid of the second one and acquire the third. And it's wonderful stuff. I recommend them to you. Yes?
I've had a chance to read all your books except for the current one. And, well, I've enjoyed Stone Barrington and so forth. I really enjoyed some of the first books where they were characters that we never heard from again. Is there any chance of going back and doing any books similar to those?
Well, those I always call standalone novels. And I used to write more of them than I do now, but my publisher and my readers want more Stone Barrington. So, and when I agreed to do, after I agreed to do 3 books a year, I agreed to do 3 Stone Barrington books. But I've tricked him because I bring in the characters from the other novels as well. And I even introduce new characters who haven't been seen before. So I think I'll rock along that way until I get some especially brilliant idea that would my readers would want more than a Stone Barrington novel. Yes?
Is there a detective in New York that you mirror Dino after?
No. When I wrote the first Stone Barrington book, I tended to think of Dino as being very much like Joe Pesci. But he's aged better than Joe Pesci has. So, yes.
Is Stone's son going to play a larger role in future books?
He will play a much larger role in one called Doing Hard Time. It was actually going to be called Doing Hard Time in Hollywood, an ironic title, but we shortened it to Doing Hard Time. And that, I think, will be out in the autumn, if I'm not completely screwed up. And you'll see a lot more of him. And Stone will be spending some time in Hollywood. And Teddy Faye will make another appearance. And an important one. Yes.
What about Stone and Holly? Will anything become of that?
About what?
Stone and Holly?
Well, they remain good friends, occasionally very close friends, if they're both in the mood. Holly's working in New York now. She's head of the CIA station in New York City, which is probably the third or fourth most important job at the CIA. And she's very happy there. Daisy, I keep getting mail about Daisy. Daisy is very happy in Florida with Ham, Holly's father, and she sees them whenever she can. Yes?
If there were to be a movie based on one of your books, which actor would you see portraying Stone?
I try not to think about that because I discovered when Chiefs was made into a film that I made some casting suggestions, and they took one or two, but they don't really care who I want to play play those parts. But a lot of people have suggested John Hamm, and I think he might be a good choice if he could sober him up long enough after Mad Men. Yes.
This lovely lady's been trying to ask you a question. You asked her a question. She has a question. Sure.
One of my questions pertain to a movie. Is there anything in the works for, I've heard that because of when you read a book, your imagination is right there. When you see it, it has to translate to the big screen. So sometimes authors don't like to put their...
No, I'm perfectly happy for Hollywood to make movies of my books. I've sold half a dozen or 8 on an option basis. The two that have been made have been Chiefs and Grassroots. Right now, there's one sort of in the hopper. There's an actor in Hollywood who has attached himself to White Cargo as a project, maybe it might get made. The chances are probably no better than 50-50. The Hollywood maw ingests a lot of material and spits out very little. So I try not to even think about those things. Yes?
I'm just curious, you were raised in the state of Georgia, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about your childhood and your upbringing in Georgia do you think helped make you the writer you are now?
Well, I think it helped me write my first novel, which was based on my hometown and family history. And I think that I got more of my Georgia experience into that than into anything else. The Will Lee books have taken place at least partly in Georgia. And occasionally it will come back and reference again.
I always enjoy your books because they do have certain things about Georgia.
I'm sorry, who's talking? I can't. Raise your hand. Oh, okay.
But I was reading listening to one of your books on the way to Savannah, New York Dead, and the protagonist was Carrie Hilliard. I felt that somewhat amusing since we were going to eat there that evening.
Terry, I'm sorry, what about?
Carrie Hilliard was in one of your first novels.
The restaurant.
Restaurant Savannah.
It's a restaurant in Savannah.
It's in Savannah.
Oh, was it? But New York Dead took place entirely in New York.
The character's name was Carrie Hilliard.
Oh, I didn't know that was a...
It's actually a restaurant in Savannah.
I didn't know that. Maybe she's branched out. Yes.
How did you come up with your character, Stone Barrington?
I read an article in the New York Times about how cats can fall from a great height, land on concrete, and survive. And the way they do that is by assuming what's called the flying squirrel position. They spread the eagle like that, and they present the greatest possible wind resistance as they're falling, and they lower what's called their terminal velocity, which you'll remember from high school physics. It would be 60 miles an hour for a human being who would be flailing and trying to get his feet under him. But cats slow it down to about, no, it would be 120 miles an hour for a human being. Cats slow it to 60. And they're even though they may get hurt and have to limp away, they can survive. So I thought, what if a woman, a beautiful woman, maybe a famous beautiful woman, fell, jumped, or was assisted from a great height, and she had some skydiving experience, and maybe she was wearing a blousing nightgown, maybe that would slow it down, and maybe she would fall into a pile of dirt left there by the public utility. Might she survive? And I needed somebody to witness this event, and I invented Stone purely for that purpose. And he's having dinner at Elaine's. He's walking down the street back to his home, and he looks up and sees the woman falling. And that was the first of the Stone Barrington novels, New York Dead. Yes?
I'm several books behind because I don't think I've been able to read a book since I had my 2-year-old. But the last one I remember reading was when Arrington was killed off. And I was so upset. Why did you kill her off? I mean,
everybody dies, you know? My characters are not immune from death.
they were meant to be
Bad things happen. Sometimes they happen to nice people. Sometimes they happen to my characters. Sometimes they just have to go, you know? Like all of us. Yes. Gentleman who's wearing his hat indoors back there, yeah.
Where's Ed Eagle?
He's still in Santa Fe. He is probably going to remain an occasional character in the Stone novels, but my readers at large are more interested in Stone than in Ed. So he'll pop up here and there. Yes?
Do you do any sailing now that you like it?
I sail only rarely and on other people's boats. I have a friend who has a 95-foot Fife ketch built in Scotland in 1914, and he has a crew of, I think, 6 or 7 and a chef. And it's the kind of sailing where the hardest work you have to do is not spilling your gin when you tack. So that's my kind of sailing these days. So I have a motorboat, and I'm also a Hinckley 38-footer, and I'm a partner in an 85-foot Trumpy built in 1934, which I get to use for a week or 2 a year. But I used to say that I couldn't buy another sailboat until I found a woman who was willing to be both chief cook and bottle washer and the foredeck gorilla. And I had not found it. Now I actually found someone who could do that. Jean-Marie could handle it with aplomb. But it would be tiring to watch her do all that work. So I'm going to stick with the motorboats, I think. Yes?
I've noticed the last 2 books were more intense. And
More
intense.
intense?
But Stone seems like he's not as active amorously as he.
Oh, well, he still seems to take every opportunity. Maybe I should invent more opportunities for him. I get a lot of mail about this. About half of them think there's way too much sex in the books, and the other half think there's not nearly enough sex. So I figure I've got it about right. You know. Yes.
Man in the Hat again.
Yes.
How does Tony Roberts keep all of these voices separate?
I don't know. I've only watched him do this once. I never actually listened to one of the tapes that Tony does, but I went to the recording studio and sat with him for a couple of hours and listened to him do it. And he's just got it taped. You know, he's a very good actor. He can do all the New York stuff, and my readers love him. So, yes.
Are you planning on any more books based in Georgia? And how many hours do you have?
Flying hours?
Yes.
Well, based in Georgia, if I come up with a really terrific idea that requires that, sure. But I've got about 3,400 hours now, I think, total. About almost 400 in the jet. So, oh, did that frighten someone? Yes.
Did you always want to be a writer or?
Always. My mother taught me to read a year before I went to school, so I became a voracious reader as a child. I read everything I could get my hands on, and including her literary guild selections. And I don't think I've ever made an honest dime doing anything else. Yes?
Do you do your own research, or have you reached a point where that really isn't necessary anymore?
Well, my personal staff consists of half a secretary and a Labrador retriever. And the secretary is very busy doing other things, and the lab is useless. So I have to do it myself. Mostly I write from my own experience, and I use Google to bring in little factoids that give verisimilitude to what I'm writing about, and to make people think that I know a lot more about a lot more things than I really do. So, yes?
How did you support yourself when you were starting out?
As I was an advertising writer first, and then when I went to Ireland to write Chiefs, I worked 2 days a week, later 3 days a week at an ad agency in Dublin, and that kept me going until Chiefs was published, and then I had a career as a writer. Anybody else? Yes?
Are there going to be Holly Barker standalone books?
If I get that kind of idea again, but again, she'll be in a lot of the Stone books. So she's in this one, in fact, the one that some of you have in your hot little hands right now, even as we speak.
I'm just curious, how
Yes.
did you and your wife meet?
We met, well, her sister introduced us. Her sister and her husband had been friends of mine since I've been back in Key West since '04. And Jean-Marie was married to somebody else at that time, but that was solved somehow. And we had a blind date, or as she likes to call it, half a blind date, because I knew it was a blind date, but she didn't. She just thought she was having dinner. But we got along very well, and we've been married 3 months, and she hasn't divorced me yet, so it must be working. Yes?
Why Knob Creek?
Oh, you're obviously somebody who hasn't drunk much Knob Creek.
No, I have.
You have? Well, that's self-explanatory if you try it. I used to be a wild turkey drinker. I like 100 proof bourbons. And somebody came to dinner at my house. I was living in Connecticut at the time, and left me a bottle of Knob Creek, which I'd only vaguely heard of. And I just put it in the bar and left it there until one day I ran out of wild turkey, and I thought, what the heck, good time to try the Knob Creek. And I've never drunk anything else on a regular basis since then. I think it's terrific stuff. It's Knob Creek, if you don't know, is the place where Abraham Lincoln was born in a log cabin in Kentucky. So it can't get any more patriotic than that. You're boozing. Yes?
What are your thoughts about the changes in the publishing business?
You mean the electronic thing?
Digital, yes.
My thoughts are that ebooks are not really as good interior decoration as real books. You can only get one on your shelf, no matter how many books it holds. I have an iPad, and I sometimes take that when I'm traveling so that I won't have to carry a lot of books. But personally, I prefer a paper book in my hand, a hardback. But the publishing industry still doesn't know how this is all going to shake out. A lot of ebooks are being sold, but a lot of paper books are being sold too. So all I can do is just wait and see. The nice thing about ebooks is once you buy one, you can't lend it to anybody. I like that. It's my feeling that everybody should have his own copy, you know. Yeah, yes. Anybody else before we wrap this up and I sign books? Yes.
Speaking of books then, how does your library at home compare to Stone's in his apartment?
In his house, you mean? Well, he has probably more bookshelves than I do, but I have 3 libraries, one in each house. So if you added them all up, there would probably be a fairly good-sized library. The main library is a bigger room than in the other 2. But Stone has a house in what's called a double-wide house, which is not the same thing as a double-wide in North Georgia. It means that it's a townhouse that's 25 feet wide instead of 17 feet wide. So he has a lot of room for, and his father was a cabinet maker who built all the woodworking things in the house. So he has quite a large capacity there.
Do you still have family in Georgia that you visit when you're here?
No, my mother died in '04, and she was the last of my Georgia relatives. Yes.
You speak of Stone and all these fictional characters as though they're real.
I speak of them as though they are real to me.
I know, it's really scary.
They live in a kind of parallel existence to mine, and I can look over there now and then and see what they're doing. I know all about them. They don't know anything about me. But it's, the only way you can write well is if your characters are real to you. How can they be real to anybody else if they aren't real to the writer? Yes?
On those lines, then, do you just keep all the details in your head of past things, or do you have to do
Except for those that fall out of my head. But yeah, I mean, I know where the characters are, what they're doing, what they've been doing, and what they might do in the future. But they sometimes surprise me. Stone surprised me in the current novel because he wakes up in a strange place. That surprised me. Yes?
I was just saying, when you develop a book, you have a whole storyline in your head. How do you develop the characters that you will pull into your story?
I write improvisationally. I start with a scene, and then I improvise from there. Yeah, I mean, I know that it'll be a Stone novel. I have something happen in the first chapter that suggests that something should happen in the second chapter, and I go on like that until I get about 50 chapters into the book, and then I start looking for a way out of the corner I painted myself into. And so far, I've always found a way out. Long may it wave.
Keep your sense of humor. Enjoy your books for the humor.
Well, thank you.
I can see, meeting you personally, where that comes from.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I think, yes?
Do you have a favorite of all the books you've read?
I think Chiefs will probably always be my favorite because that's all caught up in my hometown and family history, and because it's my firstborn child, you know. Yes?
I notice you have orchid in the name of several of your books.
Right. Well, I'll tell you how that came about, and then I think we'll have to wrap this up. I used to belong to a yacht club in England. I still belong to it, but I don't use it very much. But I get a quarterly newsletter, which is a mimeographed bunch of papers. I think they had the last mimeograph machine in the Western Hemisphere. And the last page or two is always what they call wants and offers. Those are classified ads. And people are selling their boats or boating equipment, sometimes club jewelry, sometimes a widow is selling her husband's club uniform. And I saw an ad there, and I was struck by the headline. It was an ad for a Labrador Retriever for sale, and the headline was "Excellent Working Bitch," which I didn't know, but is a dog training type expression. So I was struck by that, and I said, I could get a novel out of that. So I wrote a half dozen chapters about a policewoman in Florida and her trusty Doberman Pinscher, the bitch of the title, and I sent it to my publishers. And I said, I know that you're going to bridle at the title, but if you don't want to publish the book under this title, then I'll take it somewhere else. So they reluctantly agreed and put it in the contract that would be the title of the book. So a little time passed. I finished the book. It had been edited, and one day I got a call from somebody in the sales department, I wasn't even sure who, expressing concern that the book might not do as well, might not get as much display space or as big an advance sale in bookstores with the word bitch in the title. And I pointed out to him that there was, at that moment, a novel on sale in bookstores everywhere, simply titled Bitch, which had no canine references at all. And it was getting a lot of display space because of, not in spite of the title. Well, he hung up, grumpy. And then I managed to get phone calls from people further up the food chain, and I finally found myself in the office of the new CEO who'd been there about 2 weeks. And she said, she expressed her concerns about the title, and I expressed my views that it was a very good title, the best I'd ever had, and I liked it, and I thought it would sell books. And suddenly it occurred to me that she did not realize that this was in the contract. And so I told her that, and she threw up her hands and she said, oh, well, she said, if it's in the contract, I'll have to publish it under that title, but you shouldn't expect to get the kind of advance sale or promotional budget or the kind of printing that we would normally give you. And so I folded like a fan at that news, and I renamed the book Orchid Beach, which was the town where it took place. And so when Holly became a continuing character, I had to keep coming up with new Orchid titles. But it could have been worse. I could have had to keep coming up with new bitch titles. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. Is that good? We're going to sign books now? And over here.